Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Happy Head podcast. I'm Paul, your host today. I'm joined by David. Good morning, David.
Morning. Good to
Now,
be
the
here.
funny thing is David is literally about 15 miles up the road from me in the same county. I'm down in Folkestone by the coast. He's up in Ashford. That's right, David?
That's right. Yeah.
And from the looks out of your window, it's blowing just as hard and strong as it is down here this morning.
We're getting blown to smithereens, but it's quite refreshing as well. So,
Well, I don't know about refreshing. It blows the cobwebs away, but after about 30 seconds, it blows you away as well if you're not careful. But it's not as strong as it has been. I remember, I think it was October or November of last year. There was a couple of nights where it's kind of like nearly 70 miles an hour, and literally you had to kind of lean into the wind to actually make any progress.
Yeah, it's fun when you go out with your kids and you kind of you can pretend to be an airplane.
Yeah, you say, "Bye, kids. See you in a couple of weeks." Yeah, the wind blows you back in this direction. Especially if you tie a kite to their back and send them off. That'd be good.
That's it. Yeah, you can get up to a lot with your imagination.
Yeah, hang gliding for free. So, David, what are we chatting about today?
Well, I talk about depression and anxiety, suicidal ideation quite a bit. I grew up with it, basically. I've been suffering with mental illness since probably about 6 years old. And that kind of, got me on a journey of a lot of suffering and struggle, relentless bullying during primary school, secondary school, and got sort of very, very depressed, I'd say, by even as young as, say, 7 or 8. Started feeling very, very isolated as a result. But as they say, very often, your breakdown is your breakthrough. So over the years, it became essential to find coping mechanisms and strategies to deal with this darkness. And that got me into becoming a private counsellor, which I set up in private practice a few years ago. And so it's funny how things happen and why things happen. But in a nutshell, that's my story.
So, when you was a kid, were you diagnosed as being struggling with depression, or was it one of these things? Oh, he's just not feeling very good. He's a bit low mood, that kind of thing.
Well, I don't think I had any kind of diagnosis. I remember being carted off to various therapists, but the problem is I wouldn't talk very much. I do remember quite vividly sitting in a counsellor's chair and being asked, about my feelings. What was I feeling? What was going on in my head? And I don't even think I knew. I was just kind of numb. So, but I would say once I got into my 20s, that's when I really started to benefit from counselling. And started to open up about my struggles. And, I've been in therapy for most of my life, to be honest. And I've encountered very good therapists. I've encountered not so good therapists. So that's also been a discovery as well. Yeah.
I've got a question. Do you think that depression is something that can, and I can't think of a better word, but do you think it's something that can actually be cured, or it's something like bad eyesight that you always have to live with and is corrected by glasses?
I wish. Well, I would say there's no cure for depression. What I would say is that you can handle it on a daily basis. Same with anxiety. So there's no magic wand to wave depression away. There are also different levels of depression. There are different intensities. So, for instance, if one were to go to a GP, you would be diagnosed with severe depression or clinical depression or moderate depression or mild depression. So there are definitely different tiers of depression. But what I would say is that it can be circumstantial. So very often people go through situations where the whole universe crashes. And when it rains, it pours. They lose their job, they lose their partner, or they lose a loved one, and everything happens at the same time, and that triggers depression. But there's another spectrum where you're actually pretty much born that way. You're kind of predisposed. And I think that was the case with me. I think when I was around 6 and I started primary, I just didn't feel right. I felt isolated. Teachers would comment that I looked isolated, I looked alone, and that exacerbated my feelings. That made me feel there was something wrong with me. And yeah, it just became apparent that something wasn't right. And then as time went on, it got worse and worse, and the struggles became more and more intense. I remember getting into my teens and starting to experience suicidal ideation, which is, it doesn't go away. It's always there. But the good news is that there are so many things you can do to just take the edge off. And that's what it's about. It's just keeping it at bay so that you can get on with your day, essentially.
The fundamentals, how would you define depression? What is depression in your view, David?
Depression is a feeling of overwhelm. It's I often describe it as the feeling of no feeling. Sometimes I'll ask a client to write down what they're feeling, and they say, well, I don't actually feel anything. So that is very much a symptom of depression. It's just this feeling of numbness. And very often people can't even get out of bed, and that's because there's this sense of overwhelm. It's this sense of, I can't face the day. I can't face having to do X, Y, Z. So I would say the best definition is a feeling of numbness, a feeling of, what's the point? Just emptiness. As I said, some people just struggle to feel a full stop.
Yeah, I get that, because just something you said there about sort of being predisposed to depression, sort of like the chemicals in the head, or your, what's the word, not your DMT, your genetics. What's the phrase I'm looking for? DNA. That's
yes,
it. It's in your DNA. Because my dad was a very quiet soul, and he didn't have a lot of friends, and I get the depression now, kind of on reflection, that he struggled with depression himself a lot, or if not depression, just a kind of feeling flat all the time, because I can never I can't recall one instance where he was laughing out loud, or just belly. The only time me and my dad kind of laughed together was Monty Python. Do you remember them?
Yes.
TVs. Yeah. We would watch Monty Python when it was on at the BBC every week, and we would just fall about laughing. My mum just didn't get it. She'd walk into him and go, "What the hell are you two laughing at? It's just like some Bigfoot crushing a guy. Why is that funny?" And that's the only time I can remember him sort of being light, as in, enjoying what he was doing, kind of thing. So because I've had depression, I'm guessing, since day one, although like yourself, it was never diagnosed. But unlike yourself, I never was taken to counselors or to see anybody. I think because I was quite often ill as a child with, flu-like symptoms, and I guess you'd call it like low levels of energy, lack of enthusiasm more than anything. Because I was asthmatic as well, and I wasn't diagnosed as asthmatic. I was diagnosed as having a wheezy chest, whatever the hell that meant.
Right.
And when you say suicide ideation, that means thoughts about suicide, thoughts about taking your life, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I could be in Sainsbury's and pushing a trolley and just get these really dark thoughts. It's really bizarre. But yeah, the two things there that came to me. Sort of the first thing is about this whole concept about comedy, that you can actually be in the darkest mood, but if you see something that makes you laugh, you still have the ability to laugh. Like the brain has this incredible ability to switch within seconds from feeling like they want to end things to actually laughing. It's really quite interesting.
That is so funny with a small f that you say that, because I can remember a few times when I've been kind of in a depressive mood, and I've deliberately avoided things like turning the TV on because I knew that there was something on there that would make me laugh.
Mm.
And this sounds so crazy, but I didn't want to be made to laugh.
Yeah.
Even though I knew if I turned it on and watched a particular show, it would have me in fits. It's like, and I don't mean to be rude here, but it's like, it was almost like I wanted to wallow in
Mm.
the self-pity and the numbness and all that kind of negativity, that I knew that if I just switched the TV on and watched a comedy show, that would change my mood like that. And interestingly, now this is one of my billion coping mechanisms, that if I feel that kind of mood coming on, I don't sit there and go, okay, come on, give it to me, give me the depression, give it to me. I don't do that. I just go, no, I can feel it coming on, bang, and I'll do one of the things that I need to do that will just kind of kick it into touch.
Mm.
And it's just so fascinating you say that, because, you know, going back in time, I can definitely recall scenarios where I'm feeling really crap, I'm feeling really low, and I don't know whether it was I couldn't be bothered to change my mood, or I just felt so worthless that I didn't kind of deserve to change my mood.
Mm. Well, one of the most challenging things about depression is that when you're in that, you know, that dark cloud, the last thing you want to do is help yourself. The last thing you want to do is actually do something that's going to reduce your depression by 20%, for instance. So it's kind of like a catch-22. It's like, if someone's really suffering, you know what they need to do to pull themselves out of this mood. Well, a little bit, you know, as much as they can. But the thing is that actually doing that, as you say, is tremendously challenging. You know, when you're lying in bed and you don't want to get out of bed, to actually get out of bed is hugely challenging for people who suffer clinically. But going back to what you were saying there, I think it's interesting because there are certain things that feed depression. So, for instance, isolation feeds depression and depression feeds isolation. So the wanting to just withdraw and be on your own and be, you know, not socialized, that's a symptom. And another symptom of depression is to, as you say, not, I hate the word wallow, but actually, you know, partake in something that's going to make you even more depressed. So it's very, very common for people who have depression to watch television that is not conducive to people who have depression. So they'll watch something dark, they'll watch something that, you know, like a psychological thriller, all this kind of thing, or, you know, overwatch the news. And all these things do is exacerbate the depression. So as you say, comedy is just fantastic. But again, you've got to somehow get that switch going in your brain to say, right, enough, I need to pull myself out this funk. And comedy is a great way of doing that, because it's almost like you're tricking your brain, because your brain wants the depression, right? And you've got to somehow, it's a constant battle. You've got to somehow battle that urge to, you know, to swallow yourself up in depression. The other interesting thing you were saying about genetics, I mean, I always feel that a lot of my depression is genetic. My grandfather, he suffered with depression, so I've got a lot of time for that theory as well.
Yeah, it's difficult because despite the fact that so many people struggle with depression, there's not masses of research done into it. I mean, okay, we've got antidepressants, but again, they don't kind of cure depression. I can't, again, I'm sorry, I can't think of a better word than cure, but they don't seem to have any kind of ability to remove the problem. We've got antidepressants which kind of damp things down, because I was on them for a while and I stopped taking them because when I felt depressed, I was in a, you know, and again, I'll use the word wallow, because I was like, you know, yeah, the world hates me, I hate myself, and I hate everything. But when I was given the antidepressants, they kind of took that feeling away, but they put me in this kind of zombified state where I was just completely numb, but a different kind of numbness. You know, like, I mean, if you prick yourself, it goes, ooh, ow, you hurt yourself. With the antidepressants, it was kind of taking that mental ooh, ow away. So nothing I wasn't high, I wasn't low, I wasn't anything. Literally, how I imagine a zombie to be. And it's because I was at one stage I was diagnosed with clinical depression because of a very serious suicide attempt, and it was. I was talking to the doctor about it, and he was going, this and that, and this and that, and this and that. And my doctor at the time was very sympathetic because he'd actually lost his brother, his elder brother, to suicide. So he was trying to do his utmost to help me, and he's kind of like bending over backwards. And he sort of referred me to various people and what have you. And they were all kind of coming across with similar themes, but with different approaches. And the worst thing about it was a kind of the lack of hope in that, oh, well, I'm really sorry, Paul, but it can't be cured and it can't be managed. And I know people that are severely depressed because, again, when I was talking to the CAMS, I was referred to CAMS, which is like a local authority emergency team that come in to kind of talk to you and help you out. And I'd just come out of hospital after this attempt, and they were talking to me, and I was kind of saying to them, "This is the worst case scenario ever," because I was in that position. And they're going, "Actually, no, this is not a worst. You're not the worst case we've seen." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And they said, "Well, let me give you a really simple example, Paul. If you need to go for a pee, would you pee there where you are now, or would you get me go to the bathroom?" I'd say, "Well, actually, I'd get them to go to the bathroom." And they say, "Well, you're not in that bad a state because we have clients who will pee and do number twos where they're lying because they just don't feel worthy enough." And that just had never occurred to me because I thought, again, like probably most people in this scenario, that I've just tried to kill myself, and I was that close away from it. So I must be the worst case you've ever come across. And they're sitting there across from me going, "Actually, Paul, you're not." And that was, I found that really sad but enlightening at the same time, in that, wow, even though I've just done this thing, I'm not the worst case they've seen, which means there must be hope for me. And I think it was from that point onwards when the doctor or the psychiatrist or psychologist or whatever he was said that to me, I kind of saw, I'm not going to say I saw the light, that's a real cliche, but I kind of saw a window of opportunity. I saw a way out and a way to deal with it. And this was back in 93, 94 when this happened. And it's taken me, it took probably a good 10 years to completely eliminate the really, really bad periods. And then since then, I've come up with, like yourself, David, lots of different tactics and tools to kind of deal with it. But yeah, for me to actually be told that after I'd just come out of hospital that I wasn't the worst case, I was, flabbergasted, to use one of my favorite words.
Yes. Okay, so the three things there. The first thing I would say is that another huge challenge for people who have depression or any kind of mental illness is the lack of support. And when I say lack of support, I mean professionally, I mean family and friends. I mean, it's so common for family to totally invalidate one's depression. I come across so literally daily so many stories of depression sufferers who are completely and utterly isolated. Their families don't want to know, their friends don't want to support them, and that's massive to have to deal with. It's almost like a double whammy of pain and frustration, because on the one hand, you've got this darkness you have to deal with, and on the other hand, you've got no one supporting you. So that's the first thing. And the second thing I would say is that there's such a lack of understanding professionally. The sort of go-to solution for any kind of mental illness is just to go to the GP, get drugged up. And look, I think there are cases for medication, and it's a long conversation talking about medication, but they do work for some, but they don't work for a lot of people. And the only slight issue I have with them is that people will rely on medication to sort out their depression. It doesn't work that way. It can form part of the solution, but it is not the solution. It's not as simple to just pop a pill and eradicate your depression. And I've come across too many clients and people who, you know, are on medication, and there's no change. There's no change in how they're feeling. So, well, what's going on here? And the other thing I would say is that there's just a total lack of understanding and how to deal with it. You know, the amount of clients I have who have seen therapist after therapist after therapist, and there just seems to be an inability amongst, I would say, the majority of people to just crack this, and come up with techniques that are practical and feasible and are going to work. You know, because one thing to bear in mind is that, you know, with therapy, it's 1 hour a week, if you can afford that, and 1 hour a week, that there remains 167 hours to get through in the week, right? So it's what you do in those 167 hours that's actually going to get you through the, you know, your week. So I'm a great advocate of therapy, but I've always felt that to really understand what someone's going through, you pretty much have to have gone through it yourself and have to suffer it yourself. Otherwise, there's just that lack of understanding. Yeah, those things just came to me as you were speaking.
Now, I understand why people don't understand people with depression, because if I break my leg, people understand what a broken leg is. And if it's in plaster, they've got something they can refer to. Oh, that's a broken leg. That must have really hurt in the car crash or the ski slopes or falling off the ladder, you silly bugger. So you're now laid up for 3 months. Yeah. And people can understand that, because most people have either broken something themselves or have been around someone when they've broken someone, or they know a close member of their family have broken a leg. But with depression, there's nothing to see. You can't, you know, somebody goes, well, I've got depression, I struggle with depression. Okay, well, what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
You look fine to me. You look okay. You know, what's the problem? And if you haven't struggled with depression yourself, it's very, very difficult for anyone to explain to someone who hasn't had depression what it is, what it feels like, because, you know, oh yeah, I feel like I feel numb. What do you feel? What do you mean you feel numb? There's there lacks a kind of language for people that people can understand. You know, like if you've got, you know, if you've got cancer, everybody knows what cancer is, you know, cell problems, cells mutating, doing something bad, spreading. You got lung cancer and this cancer and that. People can understand that. And again, most of us know someone who've either had it or got a family member who struggled with it. I mean, I've lost maybe 3 or 4 members of my family to cancer, not immediate family, but, you know, second, kind of like cousins and aunties and uncles. Whereas with depression, it's, you can't see it, you can't feel it, you can't smell it, you can't touch it, you can't see a diagram. I mean, you can see an X-ray of somebody and you can see like all the cancer nodules, or you can see the break in the leg, but you can't X-ray somebody's brain and go, oh, well, yeah, there's the depression. It's just there. That's the blue spot.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the fundamental issues with understanding depression, is that we don't have something to balance it against. You know, I know what a broken leg is. I know what that feels like. I know what cancer is. We can see that, we can understand it, we can feel it. Yeah. But with depression, it's one of these things that, like lots of mental illnesses, you can't see it, you can't get a grasp of it unless you've been there yourself, which is why I think that the best therapists when it comes to dealing with depression are the ones who've actually been there, because they know how you feel, even though at the time when you're going through depression, you believe that nobody knows how you feel, that you're the own. And I'm smiling and laughing, I say, because I've been there. Yeah, I've been in that state where I've said to somebody, you don't know what this is like. You can never understand where I've been. And that's how you feel. That's how you feel when you're in that pit, when you're in that rut. Then nobody understands you. Nobody can get close to you. You don't want anybody to get close to you. And that's half the battle. And the other thing is, for me, in this understanding, is people these days, well, there's 2 things. They don't have the time to listen. And when they do kind of sit with you, they're not listening to understand. They're kind of listening to respond. And I'm sure as a counselor yourself, you see this all the time, that you ask a question and the client kind of comes back probably not even with an answer to the question. Maybe they're just like responding to what you said a minute ago, because they've not taken the time to go, okay, he just asked me about X, Y, or Z. So what do I think about X, Y, or Z? But they just give you that instant response. So I know I'm harping on a little bit here, but I think the only way forward in understanding is for people to be able to spend time and sit with someone and actually just listen to how they're feeling and how bad things are for them in that moment, and how difficult life is. Like we talked about, getting out of bed. Most people have had a morning where they've gone, I just don't feel like getting out of bed today. But then 5 or 10 minutes later, they get up, they drag themselves out, and they get on with their day. Someone with depression can't do that. And I think what it needs is more conversations, more people to talk openly about not just depression, but about mental health in general. And the poor NHS, I mean, bloody hell, my heart goes out to people in the NHS, because one of my middle sons, I only had one middle son. My middle son, when he was quite young, suffered from separation anxiety quite severely. And we were referred to the CAMS team, but we had to wait months and months and months to get a referral. And then when we did get a referral, this poor person, she was just like, her caseload was like something that Goliath would have to carry around, because it's just so, I don't know, it's just underfunded and overstretched and overstressed. And again, it's not one of those careers that people kind of run into, is it? Oh, I'm going to go and help people with mental health issues. What an exciting job that's going to be.
Well, they call depression the invisible illness.
Absolutely, and it is, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, one thing I would say is that like yourself, I've got dozens of coping mechanisms, but even with all of those and all the years it's taken to accrue them, I still get really bad days. And there can be days, I would say probably sometimes half the week, where it will take me 2 or 3 hours to get my head right. So before I'm properly starting my day, it could be 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So, this is a daily battle. And even for someone who is pretty well equipped to deal with it, as I have to deal with anxiety as well, and dark thoughts, etc. One thing I would say is that even with all these techniques that I have, you've got to kind of, there's such a huge gap between that feeling where you're completely overwhelmed and you don't want to do anything, to getting to that point where you've got to create an intention, and to actually, the starting point. Where's my starting point going to be to free myself from this? So, for instance, if I'm, it's first thing in the morning and I'm feeling like crap and I don't want to do anything, I've got to get to a point where I set an intention to, I don't know, go for a walk, for instance. But that's a huge step. If you're really suffering, it's a huge step to actually make that decision. Right, I'm going for a walk. Once you're on the walk, that's when the momentum builds, because you're investing in yourself. You're doing something that, you're kind of like showing up for yourself. You're sending a message to your brain that you matter. And so what happens is, as you get out on that walk, you instantaneously just take that edge off the depression, because you're sending this message to yourself that you're worth it. So that's the hardest bit. It's getting to that point where you make the decision to do something, but without those tools, without being shown that, without learning that stuff, everyone's in the dark. You're totally in the dark. I mean, why would you it's something that has to be learned, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about how to treat depression. So my heart goes out to people with it, because it must be so isolating. Well, I know it is, but it must be so isolating just not knowing what to do. just being stuck in this darkness and not knowing what to do. One thing I always recommend to people is to reach out to support groups, because, as I said, so often family and friends can't identify, and they'll call you a drama queen, or, pull your socks up, and all those kind of patronizing comments, or, you'll get over it, or you're overreacting and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I hear that constantly. So I always suggest to people to reach out to people who are also struggling, because when somebody else tells their story, it's healing. And someone's being real, and they're getting vulnerable, and they're opening up about their struggles, it's healing for the person listening. Why is it healing? Because they can identify. It makes them feel less isolated, and it makes them think, okay, other people are going through this, so I'm not alone. So it's really important to try and, especially when family are not taking you seriously, that's when you need to find people who are going to be there for you, on that emotional level. And it's the hardest thing in the world, not getting support, for instance, from your parents. I come across it so much. And what I say to people is that, well, sometimes in life you have to assign different people for different things in your life. So your parents are providing a roof over your head. Okay, that's their role. They're not providing you emotional support, and that's heartbreaking, obviously. But maybe you can get that emotional support from someone else.
Yeah, a couple of really important points there. I think it's equally important for people with depression to understand why close members of the family don't understand. Like we just talked about, I'll not go over it again, but if you start getting angry at people that are close to you because they don't understand, that's not going to help. I think one really important step forward is to just accept that people aren't going to understand unless they've been through it. Like we've talked about, they're just not going to get it. And they are going to say things like, oh, you'll feel better, go for a walk. Oh, just pull your socks, you'll be fine. Watch, do this or do that or do the other. And they are trying to help, even though they're patronizing, even though they're some of the most stupid comments somebody can make, they are trying to help. So I think it's really important that you understand that when they say these crappy, horrible, patronizing things, they're not being nasty. They just think it's, it will help you. Come for a walk with me, Paul. Let's go. Yeah, okay. Yeah, maybe next year sometime. It's the one thing I would say, though, is I completely agree with you, get support, but please don't go to some of these groups on Facebook, for example, where it's like, my depression is worse than your depression. No. I've tried to kill myself 15 times this week. Only 15 times. I've tried to kill myself 75 times this week, and I'm on 75 different types of antidepressants. I've got depression. You haven't. You don't know what you're talking about. Please stay away from those groups, because they're more harmful than helpful. They're not going to give you the kind of support that you need. If you want a bit of a giggle, go in there. But seriously, if you are struggling with depression right now, just stay away from those groups, because they're just going to dig your rut deeper. They're not going to kind of help you fill the rut in.
Yeah, I think it was more the kind of groups I was talking about is maybe, if at one point you had a passion, or you have a hobby, you have an interest, and you can, go and sort of mix with people. Because I think something I come across a lot as well is, again, someone with depression can feel as though they have no friends, that they have no kind of support system at all. And just getting out there and doing something that, you semi-enjoy can provide a lot of relief and a lot of distraction. Yeah, it's tough. It's trying to get away from this feeling of isolation, which I think is always the first port of call. And when you feel that there is that support mechanism there, that can really take the edge off.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's really important what you just said there, David, about understanding that you do have friends. You do have, we've all got, even if we think we haven't got friends, you have got friends, people that, you know, maybe in photography club or the gardening group or the gaming group that, you know, I can't think of a game, Call of Duty group that you play in, you know, they're mates, they're friends. You might not call them friends, but if you're speaking to them twice a week and you've been doing that for months and months and months, and yeah, that by any other definition, they're a friend.
Yeah.
So, and you might not feel able to reach out to them in a certain sense. You don't have to, but just having a conversation about the thing, about the game or the movie or the sport or your favorite football team or whatever, that is a really, really important step, because it will help you just to have conversations. Because I found, and again, I can only talk from personal experience, that if I distracted myself, and like again, talking about the getting out of the bed thing, not wanting to get out of bed, if I could just pick up a book or a magazine or actually turn the TV on, or even some cases just think about, my thing is photography. Just think about maybe, you know, well, yeah, I mean, the weather's crap today and I don't feel like getting up, but hopefully tomorrow the weather might be nicer and I might be able to get out and take a couple of photographs, or I might just be able to, you know, recharge, put the batteries on the charger. Just simple little things, tiny little things can have a massive effect, a massive kind of boost. Because as you mentioned earlier on, David, about taking that first step, if you can just think, oh yeah, I tell you what, I can get out of bed just to plug my camera in to charge it. Yeah. Or just to, you know, download that new game or to do an update on my computer. That tiny, tiny little thing, which feels insignificant, can be the first step to you helping yourself move forward. Or just calling that mate and say, look, you know, I'm really busy at the moment, but have you got time tonight to have a chat about that chess move we saw the other day, or that movie, or whatever? Just, it's tiny things I found that help you get out of bed, that help you make that first step, that help you just do that little thing that kind of tips the balance in your favor.
That's really great. And the idea of taking the first step, I would also say small steps. So, you know, especially this would especially relate to somebody who struggles to get out of bed, and there's a lot of people out there. And the first thing I would say is that what's going on? What's showing up for you? And they would say, well, I think about what I have to do in the day, and it's too overwhelming. I can't face it, so I stay in bed. And what I would say to that is, well, don't think about the day. Don't think ahead, because thinking ahead is a recipe for disaster. When you think ahead, you are setting yourself up to fail. So what I would say is just focus on getting out of bed. That's all you need to do. Focus on getting out of bed. And once you're out of bed, okay, what's next? Right, let's go and brush my teeth. Okay, don't think beyond brushing your teeth. Brush your teeth. So that's one strategy that I really like, is just forget about the future, forget about the day. Just, what do I need to do now? And it's really interesting, the relationship between depression and anxiety. And there's two reasons for that. First of all, the strategies that one can employ to reduce depression also work for anxiety. That's really interesting. And the other thing is that when you have that sense of overwhelm, very often it's because the thought of the whole day fills you with dread. And again, that is linked to anxiety. That can develop anxiety, the fact that you're thinking about, you know, having to get through your day. But the thought of having to get through your day makes you depressed. So there's such a link there between depression and anxiety. And the other thing I would say is something that I really like to do is I've come up with this rating system. So if I'm feeling, you know, especially dark, I will think, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how am I feeling right now? And I'll say, well, I'm feeling 10 out of 10 for darkness. I think, okay, well, I want to get that down to 8. Let me start by getting that down to 8 out of 10. So let me shave off 20% if I can of that intensity. And then I'll look to my list of things that I can do. And I'll do one thing on the list. Maybe it's a journal. Maybe I'll get my diary out and I write down what's going on in my head. What am I anxious about? What's showing up for me? And then maybe I'll try and reframe it. Maybe I'll try and break down all the anxieties or all the things I'm depressed about and try and work through them. So maybe that's one tool I can use. Maybe I'll spend 20 minutes doing that. And if I can do that and then feel maybe I'm 8 out of 10 now, maybe my depression is not as intensive as it was 20 minutes ago. What that does is, again, it sends a message to the brain, because it's all about rewiring your brain. It sends a message to the brain that actually I'm going to be rewarded if I do X. If I do this to reduce my depression, I can see it's worked. That motivates you, because human beings like reward. We like to feel that if we do something, it's going to improve our mental being or physical well-being. So that's why it works, that when you're constantly assessing how intensive is my depression right now, and then you do something to reduce it, and then you can see as the outcome that I have reduced it, I've taken the edge off, that motivates you to keep doing it.
That's a really important point, David. Taking the edge off, that's a really cool little phrase, because that's what it's all about. Like we mentioned earlier on, about not looking to what you're going to do in the future, but just getting out of bed, and then the next step, brushing your teeth, and the next step, having some breakfast, and so on and so forth. But it's all about just taking that edge off. That's a really, really cool thing to think about, is what can I do to reduce the intensity? What can I do to just make it less hurting? Make it, I can't even speak English now. Make it hurt less. Yeah.
It's the wind.
It's weird. I'm inside as well, so I don't know how the wind's affecting me when I'm indoors. But yeah, I get it. I don't have a rating system. I have the way I kind of deal with it, or my awareness is, I got it up here. Imagine, it's tiny, there we go. Imagine a full stop. Ooh, where's it gone? There you go, a little tiny full stop on a piece of, on a page. Do you remember the cartoons where the hero's being chased by the bad guy? The hero reaches into a pocket and throws a black dot onto the floor. The bad guy, the villain, runs along, falls into the black dot, disappears. The hero picks up the black dot, sticks it back into the pocket, and carries on running. My depression was that black dot. And what used to happen was that before I'd realized it got so big that I'd fallen into it, and I was into this black, dark, horrible, nasty space. So I thought, okay, black dot, how can I take control of that? And that's what I did. I put it onto a piece of paper as a full stop. And that's how I monitor my depression. So most days it stays like that little full stop on a page. And I check this kind of daily. And if I see it kind of expanding, I take action immediately to take the edge off, like you just said, which is why I just think that's a brilliant phrase. And by taking the edge off, again, I got a whole list of things that I can use, but I would just pick one of those and deal with it, and then just watch it shrink back down again. I really love Winston Churchill's definition of his depression. He called it his black dog. He used to kind of just follow him around all the time. Yes. And the way he did, I mean, imagine this guy is kind of, has this massive amount of stress and anxiety on his shoulders for all the stuff, all the mistakes he's made during the war, all the stuff he's having to face day in, day out. And the way he kind of coped with it is he'd go off and build a wall that had no meaning whatsoever, apart from the fact that it was distracting him from all these dark thoughts. Or he'd go and paint a picture. He had these coping mechanisms. He had these ways of dealing with things. And this the black dog. And I think that's a beautiful little thing to think about. Is that one way of coping with this darkness is to not treat it like an enemy. It's just a thing. It is not an enemy. It's like the broken leg. To avoid a broken leg, you hopefully don't go skydiving or watch where you're walking, and follow basic health and safety principles when you're working up a ladder, that kind of thing. But with depression, we can do the same kind of thing. We can kind of just see it as a thing rather than this kind of insurmountable mountain that kind of plonks itself over you and locks you in. See it as an illness, see it as something that you can deal with, that can be treated, and that you can take control of, like you and I have both done. We have mechanisms in place now to recognize it. You've got your scale of 1 to 10, and I've got my little dot. And there's probably a million other ways of kind of signifying it as well. And I think that's a really important step, is to recognize it is an illness. It's not you. You are not depression. Yeah. This is something that, whether you're genetically predisposed to it, or it's come on because somebody's died, or you've lost your job, or whatever, you are not depression. Yeah. You have an illness. I think that one of the biggest things you can do is to recognize that and accept that you and depression aren't the same thing. Yeah. You can eventually, with time and with help, you can separate yourself from it and find a way to kind of accept it and deal with it.
I really love that full stop thing. I love that. It's quite similar, actually. I would say that depression is not a choice, but what you can choose to do is reduce it. And interestingly, one of the really big challenge for people who suffer are the thoughts. So the ruminating thoughts, the negative thoughts. And I think one misconception about negative thinking and ruminating thoughts is that you can stop them. You can't stop thoughts. But what you can do is, well, there are two tools I use. The first is to actually try and sometimes stand up to them. So I kind of have an analogy where you walk down the street and you see a doorman outside a nightclub and they're not letting people in. And you can do the same thing sometimes. Sometimes you can actually get tough with your depression, get tough with your anxiety and say, right, I've had enough. I've had enough of, you trying to bring me down and talk badly about me, because that's all it is. It's all negative voices and negative thinking and self-blame and regret and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes you just have to stand up to it and say, bleep off, go and do one, that kind of thing. And I sometimes find that really works. And another tool which I really like is what's really fascinating about the brain is that one minute you can, be completely overwhelmed with negative thoughts, but if there is the power to actually change a thought in a second, in a heartbeat, if I told you right now, right, I want you to remember a time when you felt really connected, or when you felt joy, or when you felt connection, right? And you could probably do that in a few seconds if I made you. If I said to you, right, close your eyes and go there right now. Just think of something that makes you feel really happy. You could do it in a few seconds. So that shows you that actually we do have quite a lot of power that we're not aware of, that we do have the power to change a thought like that in a heartbeat. So those are two quite useful tools.
Yeah, it's really good. The bouncer, that's one thing that I use, in the sense of, if I feel a negative thought coming in, I just tell it to go away. Yeah, I just say, I'm one of the sort of the top class bouncers, because low class bouncers, they'll grab you by the throat and say, you're not coming to my club, sunshine, and they'll throw you on the floor. The really high quality bouncers in the sort of exclusive clubs in London, they don't need to do that. They go, I'm really sorry, sir, you're not allowed in today. My apologies. Have a nice evening. And that's it. You ain't getting in. So you walk away. And that's what I do with my thoughts. A thought comes in like, oh, God, you know what you're up for? You're effing useless today. You bleeped 4 times. I go, okay, thanks for that. I'm not interested right now. Can you go away? And it works. As really crazy and as silly as it seems, you had that thought comes into your head, you just tell it to go away. Now, again, if you're in the black hole right now, you're thinking, that will never work. That's just never going to work. And I get it and I understand it. But what I would say is, when you are in a better space, maybe later today or whenever, yeah, have a go with it. Just have a go with it. And just that thought comes in that says, you're hopeless. Go, yeah, okay, I've heard that a million times before, but I don't want to hear it today. Thanks very much. Talk to you later. Bye. It will go away. Now, this is with a lot of my clients, a lot of different kind of issues, is I do the same thing. And what I do say to them, though, is that you have to practice it. Because the first time, it may come back again and back again and back again. You kind of give in and it beats you down. But with practice, you get really good at it. And the thought will go, oh, all right, then I'll bugger off, go somewhere else. Yeah. And again, it's not going somewhere else. You're just making it disappear. But it works. Again, using your analogy of the bouncer outside of the club, it does work. Practice it a few times and you'll find that, wow, it's gone. Yeah, I can't, that I'm hopeless thing, it's disappeared. It's a great little tool. It really, really is. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, David, you mentioned right at the start of this conversation that you're a counsellor. What kind of counsellor are you? You're a psychotherapist? Are you CBT?
Yeah. So I'm very much technique and coping strategy orientated. So, but it really depends on the individual. If somebody's experienced trauma and they want to revisit it and treat it and work through it, then obviously, that may need to be part of the therapy. Generally, what I say to people is there are two routes to go. You can either talk about the painful experiences you've had growing up and in childhood, because obviously that creates a roadmap for where we are today. Or you can draw a line under the past and say, from here on, what am I going to do? What are my strategies? What are my coping tools? So it really depends on the individual. But I specialize with people who've lost a loved one, so with bereavement. I suffered bereavement when I was quite young, and with people who suffer with depression and anxiety. And as I said, generally tend to work with strategies which are going to help you right now, which are going to help you today, tomorrow, the next day. Because no matter what's happened in our past, we can't undo it, and we can't change it, and we can't relive it. So that's really the way I tend to push people, in that direction, is to say, right, well, what tools can I develop? Yeah.
Where's the best place for people to reach out to you, David?
So my website's healyourgrief.co.uk, and you can get everything on there. I've created an online video course for depression sufferers. There's a podcast on there, and if you wish to have an informal chat and see if counselling is of interest to you, then the first session is free, just to see if it's something that you could benefit from. So yeah, it's everything's on the website.
And are you on social media somewhere?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, Heal Your Grief. I have a guided meditation podcast, which is the Minds That Matter Meditations, and that's essentially everything. Yeah.
Listen, David, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. It's been an enlightening discussion, because we've both kind of been there with the subject we've been talking about, but it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. And I think that's the important point to get across to people, is that there is a solution. There is a way out. There is a way of dealing with it. There is a way of coping with it. And for each individual person that's struggling with depression, that way out, that way of dealing with it may be different, but there are 1,000,001 solutions to help. So just wherever you are right now, understand this, that you can and will be able to get a grip on it at some stage.
Absolutely. And as I said, it's how you fill your day that's going to make such an impact on your life. And it's so easy to get dragged down with the depression, to get swallowed up by the depression. And listen, it's debilitating, and identify with it. But the good news is that there are so many things you can do to help yourself.
Absolutely. And on that note, listen, thank you, David. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye now.